Welcome to the Wellness Rebel Show, where you reclaim your health and tap into your body's healing power. I'm your host, Fatima, here to empower you with the knowledge and tools to take charge of your well-being. Whether you want to boost energy, improve mindset, or unlock vitality, this is your go-to source for practical advice and inspiration. It's time to step into your power and live a life of health and freedom. Welcome to the revolution. Welcome back to the Wellness Rebel Show. Today, I have Alexandra, the founder of Just the Inserts. It's a platform dedicated to empowering individuals with accessible, transparent information about medical choices. Welcome, Alexandra.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited to have you on here. And before we begin, I want to know first the mystery, because I know before you had a faceless account, right, on Instagram. Do you have any reasoning why you did that? And then what made you decide to finally hey, it's me?
Well, so when I first started reading inserts, manufacturer inserts, first started talking about the importance of informed consent and just being more vocal about what was going on in my own state with mandates and exemptions. I did it all on my personal account, and I was heavily shadow banned, heavily censored, and I lost a lot of friends from that. So I actually started in the realm while it was personal and it was me sharing, and I was a young mom and I was just researching all of these things. And we can go into my origin story if you want to later on. I've talked about it a whole bunch, but basically it was I had experienced pharmaceutical adverse reactions throughout my adult life, and then my daughter had an adverse reaction to the synthetic vitamin K injection. So I was just sharing a lot of the things that I was researching in my personal Instagram, and people did not like that. It did not go over well. So I just prayed for guidance and asked how I could be most effective. And during that time, the response that I got was to start an account for Just the Inserts. And so I started, and I was anonymous for 4 years. And originally it was to just focus people on the content, have people intentionally just spend their energy on .gov resources about manufacturer inserts, about the pharmaceutical industry, the things that we know that the government says about potential financial conflicts of interest, how products are added to the schedule, things like that. I just wanted everyone to focus on that and then not look at me, because it doesn't matter anything about me, what I look like, what I sound like, my background, my educational background, my socioeconomic status. None of that matters in informed consent. Informed consent is a basic human right, and nothing about me deters or detracts from the truth that is to be known from our manufacturers, from our government about these topics. So that's how it originally started. And then during the COVID era, 2021 era, I was receiving death threats, real credible death threats. And so then it was a way to protect me and my family's safety. My husband was working for a startup at the time, and we were really worried. In that time frame, people were contacting people's employers and telling them that they needed to be fired from their job. And so we were genuinely worried. My husband, we are a sole income family, and we were just worried of him losing his job. And so that's why I continue to stay anonymous. And then in September of 2021, I was deleted from Instagram with 148,000 followers for sharing .gov information. That's all I shared.
Yeah.
And after that, I was pregnant with my second child, and I just needed a break. I was so mentally, physically, spiritually exhausted from several years, just every single day spending 5 to 10 hours. I'm not even joking. That's not an exaggeration. Spending that amount of time trying to get the message out there, trying to share all the research that I had found. So it forced me to work on my website, but it also allowed me just to enjoy the last little bit of pregnancy that I had, my postpartum time, just cherishing the time with my toddler. And then I was able to come back onto Instagram when Elon Musk bought Twitter. Ironically enough, that same day I was allowed to go back on. I don't know why. I didn't ask a whole bunch of questions, but everything had been wiped, so I had to rebuild. And I just slowly started rebuilding, and I did a free training course on how to read and find manufacturer inserts. And then this past year, I had a year ago now almost. I can't believe that. That's crazy. I had my third baby, and right after she was born, I decided that I needed to put everything in print form. And so I wrote and published my first book last year, and it's doing so well. So towards the end of that, I started realizing that it is so hard to share my message, share my story, share other people's story of the community that I've built behind a logo. And it's so much easier to do it when I have a face. I can't really go on podcasts and I can't really do all the things that I want to do with my mission without me being a part of it. And so it was last fall that I decided to show my face and say, okay, it's been me. I've been doing it. And it was so funny. I got a few people there who said, I don't believe it's really you. And so I had to prove it to them that, no, it's me. I had to show like old logos and old things that I had done just to prove that it was me. But it is me. I've been doing it from behind the scenes this whole time. And I broke my anonymity in October of last year. And by the end of the year, I had been on 17 podcasts, which is actually, that's a lot for
that is
a mom
lot.
of three young kids to do that. Thank you so much to all of my family members and babysitters that helped me out with the kids. But that just shows how eager people are. And a lot of these podcasts, they were business professionals, medical professionals, moms, society, culture, all these different types of podcast categories, and they all just want informed consent. And I think that's one thing that is so beautiful. We are so diverse. We come from so many different backgrounds, but we all deserve to know what manufacturers say about their own products, what the government says. So when you messaged me and said, will you come on? I'm like, yes, absolutely. I'd love to. Anybody that wants to talk about informed consent, I will be there.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, it's a very important topic to me, because a lot of moms, even moms or dads, parents in general, think that receiving just that paper, that short paper with things from the doctor is what they need to see to make that informed decision for these medical procedures. Whether everyone agrees or not, vaccines is our medical procedure. And whatever other things from big pharma, right? Yeah, so that's an incredible journey. Yeah, people can be vile sometimes, so I get why you decided to stay faceless for a while. And it truly is a scary world out there. Right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what has been the most rewarding aspect of helping people navigate informed consent?
Oh, that's a beautiful question. I don't think I've been asked that before. I think it's just to see people be able to make the decisions for themselves and not doing it because not doing it and then not doing it because somebody else said. So I think medical coercion is, it can be when someone tells you that you have to have a product, and it also can be when someone tells you that you don't need to have a product. And for me, when I get messages of people saying, just tell me what to do, what would you do? And I appreciate and I understand the intent behind that, but that's not my goal. My goal is to equip you. My goal is to show you how you can make knowledgeable, confident medical decisions. I have firm faith in you being able to make the best decisions for your personal situation. Now, do I think that there are some products on the market that I think should be pulled for safety concerns? 100%. There are definitely products that I think have been on the market way too long. They need to get pulled either for further safety studies, or there's enough safety studies that has proven that they need to be pulled. There are products on the market for that. However, the underlying tone of everything that I do is that I want you to make your own decisions. I don't want you to make a decision based on my experience. I don't want you to make a decision based on someone in authority making their own decision, or in society making their decisions and you just follow suit. That is such a toxic and really unhealthy way to make medical decisions. And so my goal is to nurture your intuition and put fact to some of the things that you might be feeling in your gut. Like, I get messages constantly of, thank you for verbalizing what my intuition was telling me. Thank you for providing credibility and validity to what I was feeling, but I didn't know how to put it into words. That, to me, I love that. That just fuels me. And yes, there are vile people on the internet and they're bots. I'm convinced most of them are bots. But
Yeah.
When I get messages like that, it just makes my day, and it continues me. It allows me to continue showing up and keep pushing forward, because I do think that there has been suppression of our intuition, especially as parents.
Mm-hmm.
And just
Yeah.
patients as a whole. We have been taught that we aren't smart enough to know what's going on in our own body. And what I talk about in the book is that our body should be the first thing that we have the ability to comprehend and be in tune with, because it is the mechanism in which we can achieve any other accomplishment in our lives. It's by our body, by our brain, by our abilities. That's how we are able to accomplish anything else. So our first thing that we should be able to understand is our own bodies. So yeah, that's a great question. I love that. That's a really, really that's what I would say is when they get their own confidence and
Yeah.
their intuition back. That's probably my favorite part.
I love that. Yeah. Yeah. We're here to empower them, not to be another dictator, right? To the
Mm-hmm.
decisions that they need to make. I also get it. Like a lot of, especially first time parents, they're nervous. There's too much information on the internet, too much noise. And so sometimes they're just like, just tell me what to do. But then they also don't realize that it's like, yeah, we did, like, you did hundreds, thousands of hours of research and it's saving you time, but you still also need to research for yourself. Like, you
Mm-hmm.
really can't put that, you just can't rely on someone else for, to make decisions when it comes to your health and to your life, right?
Right. I always think of the have you heard the story of the little boy and the caterpillar? It's real. I'll boil it down to really short. It's actually a really long one, but I'll make it really short. So basically, this boy was walking to school and he saw a caterpillar and it was in its cocoon. And for a few days, he would pass by and he kept seeing this caterpillar in its cocoon. Well, finally, he walked by and he started to see the caterpillar coming out of the cocoon, the butterfly coming out,
Yeah.
and it was struggling. And so the next day at school, or then when he walked to school, he brought scissors and he helped cut the butterfly free. Well, the next day when he came, the butterfly was still on the leaf, wasn't able to fly, because there is a process when a butterfly comes out of the cocoon that it squeezes all the liquid, all the moisture out of the wings and allows them to fly. And so I think a lot of times when people message me asking for me to just make the decision for them, that's me cutting their cocoon and not allowing them to be able to have that metamorphosed into their own equipped, knowledgeable beings to make their
Yeah.
own medical decisions. And so I think about that constantly, that illustration of, yes, we want to be helpful. And yes, I want to streamline your research, but I do not want to replace your research. I want to train you to be able to do all of this because, yes, I did have to learn it on my own, but that doesn't have to be the case for everybody else. I just want to make it easier for you to learn it. And then whatever product comes down the market, whether it's RSV or all these things, they're going to be a slew of different products that I can never predict. But no matter what, whether I have an Instagram website, book or not, you will be able to make those more informed decisions in the future.
Yeah. That is a beautiful analogy. What a beautiful story. It almost also reminds me about birth, like, right? It's
Yeah.
like, don't induce. Like, there's like real, like every step is important, unless it's
Exactly.
really absolutely necessary.
So
When
true.
you said that, you're like, oh yeah. I'm like, wow, I didn't even know that, but that's good to know.
I
Don't
kind of
help
butchered
out.
the story a little bit, but you can go find it on the internet. It's
Yeah,
actually
I mean,
very beautiful and poetic, and I just boiled it down to its bare minimum. But
right. But I mean, that's pretty much kind of like the most important part, though. It's like, yeah, let's not, it's almost like like you said, we need to get back in touch with our intuition because we've been so removed from it that we're like, we don't know what to do anymore when we get sick. Like,
mm-hmm.
we're always like, oh, what medicine can I take? That's pretty much sometimes always the first question. It's like, well, how about let's start with herbs that came from the earth, or, other way, or
Mm-hmm.
trust in your body that it can heal itself if you give it the tools. But yeah, I love that because I was just thinking about, I'm in a group of pregnant moms, and I see a lot of moms saying like, "Oh, my doctor is telling me I need to get induced at 39 weeks." Like all these things, and it's like,
Mm-hmm.
no, they just want you to be on their schedule.
Well, and it's hard because I think there's been a shift, and we could talk at length for the reasons why and how it all happened. But at the base, there's been this shift in our culture that we have to seek approval from other people to make decisions about our own body, not realizing that these people don't have authority over us. I am a firm believer that we have authority over the medical decisions that we make for ourselves and for our family. And with that authority comes responsibility. And if you are responsible for potential adverse reactions, potential complications of a disease, you have the right to accept, delay, or decline any and all medical products. And I really hound on that in the book, in my training course, and just in my daily interactions, because we think, oh, well, my doctor's going to be upset if I get off birth control, or my doctor's going to be upset if I don't follow the CDC schedule. And that's not right. The reason why we have these medical products is not because you want to placate your doctor. These products should be used as tools in disease prevention and treatment. And if you do not want to use those tools, that does not make you a bad person. That does not make you a bad mother. You are just making informed decisions as a consumer on whether you want to accept those products into your health protocol for your family. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. And for us to kind of outsource that authority to someone that we are hiring as a service, as healthcare as a service, that is a very warped way of doing it. We don't really do that with any other product on the market or service on the market. For some reason in our culture, we are like that. So hopefully the more we talk about it, the more we have open and respectful conversations about medical products in the medical industry, we can kind of tear that down little by little and start realizing, oh, okay, this is a medical product. Oh, this is a service. My doctor isn't, my authority figure. I can find a second opinion, or I can go somewhere else, or I don't have to go in the whatever my insurance network tells me that I have to go to. I might have to work a little bit harder. I might have to pay out of pocket a little bit, but I do have other options. So that's something that I try to work on as well, just for those that are so obsessed with trying to placate their doctors, that you don't have to be in that mindset.
Right? Yeah, sometimes we forget that we're hiring, they're actually working for us, and we can fire them.
Yes.
Yes. Like, don't be scared if all of a sudden you get a letter that says, oh, you're not following the CDC schedule, I'm going to have to make you leave the practice. Hey, guess what? There's plenty of other practitioners and providers out there.
And it's growing more and more.
Right? But I know sometimes too, I think people are just like, well, in our culture, we're so not brainwashed, but like we kind of like always think like, oh, we need to have the health insurance. Why is alternative medicine more expensive? And why don't they take health insurance? But they don't realize how the whole thing works, right? To me, health insurance, like the traditional health insurance, it is in bed with big pharma, and they aim to have lifelong customers. And so it's harder for you to choose the provider that you really want and that aligns with you.
That's so true. And the more you research, the more you realize it. And it sounds so crazy from the jump. If you start off with that, it's like, oh, well, that person's really crazy. But the more research, the more that you research it, and the more, honestly, I have hundreds of thousands of medical providers who have messaged me over the past 4 years. Insurance, this one guy, he worked in insurance, and he asked me to cover products that he sees constantly cover his desk of all these different medications that he's constantly approving claims for. And so he asked me to cover a few of them, and I did. And most of them are like heart medications, statins, things like that. But once you talk to people that are in it and you start researching it yourself, and you realize this is not set up right. This is kind of set up for the patient to set up for failure. They're not going to, if they're seeking to health or be the healthiest that they can be, that's probably not the best system for them to be in.
Yep. Yeah. I always kind of say, like, they should call it sick insurance. Right? Yeah, it's great to have, especially in emergencies. Like if you have a tragic car accident, or you need to have a very, very needed surgery, it's great to have. But to me, like I myself, we don't have health insurance, because when I'm looking for plans, like we can't even cover the deductible because we barely see the doctor. Knock on wood.
Right. Well, for us, when I was pregnant with my first, we had the highest tier available for healthcare within my husband, the startup that he worked for. And even with that, when we had our first baby, I still had to pay out of pocket more than when I had my second and third births at home, because home births were so much cheaper, and I had a way better experience. So to me, it was just like, why am I paying more for a worse experience? But when I did the motherhood guide, I'm a big fan of home birth, but I do understand it's not for everybody. Not everybody
Mm-hmm.
feels comfortable with home birth. And so when I did my motherhood guide, I had a section on home birth. I had a section on C-section. I've had friends that have had trauma from C-section, and they have to have C-sections if they have future children because they've had vaginal or uterus ruptures. And so I made sure to have a section for C-section so you can make informed decisions about that and just to help your body recover, prepare and recover, and ways to seed the microbiome for your baby because that's something that they miss when they don't go through the birth canal, things like that. And then I have a section that if you want to have a more natural-minded hospital birth, it might be a little hard depending on what hospital you're going to, but there are things that you can try to do beforehand and during and after to try to accomplish that the best way that you can. So I don't, if anyone's listening, like I'm not just 100% you have to do this or 100% you have to do that. I don't
Right.
believe in absolutes. I believe that it's very personalized and based on your situation and everything that you're
Yeah.
personally dealing with it at this time.
Exactly. 100%. And that's the important thing. That's why if you know true informed consent and if you do decide to have your birth within the hospital system, then what you can decline and like what you can say no to. And let's say like if your baby goes to NICU and they're like you can't be here, you can totally be like whose rule is that, like
Right,
like it's not
exactly.
like you have the right to know and you have the right to be in there. It's just as long as you know how it works. Like
Mhm.
don't you we have to take back our power because that's what, like you said, like we've almost like given like the power away to someone else. And then we have like I feel like it's a mixture of fear, like
Mhm.
you're scared that you're gonna make the wrong decision, and so you give your power away to someone else thinking that they're more knowledgeable than you.
Mhm.
Like, well, you know how to research too, like you probably have done more research than that doctor in front of you.
Mhm.
Right.
That's true. Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah. All right, let's go to how do you
Mhm.
handle conversations about medical products when someone is resistant to new information?
Well, I have a lot of grace for people like that because that was me. When my mom, well, so I actually asked my mom to research the Tdap vaccine when I was
Okay.
pregnant with my first child because I was so mentally exhausted from researching everything else. So I asked her to research. And when she called me up, because she was living out of state at the time, she was just so adamant that I would be basically putting me and my baby on the chopping block if I accepted the Tdap vaccine. And she was just so forceful and so crossed a lot of boundaries and was not in a healthy response, healthy discussion state, at least at that time. And now that I've read the inserts and I've read everything about the industry, I understand. I get why she was like that, but that was not the way to go about it. And one of my other friends, she says her message got lost in her mess, and I think that's very true and something that I personally have to be very cautious about anytime I ever have any interactions in person or online because I understand what it feels like not knowing what you don't know. And when you start researching, you start at fact A, and then you go to fact B, and then you go to fact C, all the way to fact Z. But if you go into a conversation with someone with fact P or something like that, they're going to have no idea what you're talking about, and it's going to be potentially very off-putting to them. So my advice would be is that if you have a loved one that you're having unproductive conversations with them, to try to understand their perspective and to make the assumption that we all just want what is best for ourselves, our families, and our communities. And yes, there are nefarious people out there, but if we are just talking with our loved ones and just trying to communicate with them, I would hope that that would not be a nefarious situation. So just going in with the assumption that they are just trying to do the best with the information that they have, and then you can with love share the research that you are researching. And I was talking with someone who was asking me how to share information with her husband because her husband was very resistant. Her husband was actually like me. He only wanted to hear from .gov information, which is what I originally wanted. And so I was kind of just sharing with her. It's important too to understand, how does that person learn? Do they learn by reading? Do they learn by auditory or visual, or are they kinetic? They have to go in themselves. So to understand, how does that person learn, and then what are ways that you can help them supplement their learning? So do you need to find a podcast that maybe would resonate with them? Do you need to find a documentary? Do you need to find a website? I know a good one, justtheinserts.com, or an Instagram. Do they like social media? Do they like long form? Do they like short form? So trying to understand what might be the best way for them to start researching themselves, and then find that for them. And then not be a dictator and say, I found this for you. I want you to watch it. Just be more of, hey, I found this. I watched it. I would love your perspective on it. I would love to hear what you think about it, because that accomplishes two things. The first thing is you hopefully have encouraged them to watch it themselves. And two, you are already from the gate saying that I value your opinion and I want to hear your opinion. And so it almost kind of breaks down any of those hostile, combative conversations that many of us have had in the past. And it allows it to be, okay, this is something that obviously this person is very concerned about and they want my advice. So I'm going to watch it and then, hopefully have a productive conversation about it. And a lot of times too, with parents that I talk to, healthcare typically isn't a exploding offer. When you're sitting in a pediatrician's office and they say, these are the vaccines that your child is due today, it's not an exploding offer. You have time to go and research those products yourself. You don't have to say yes or no that very minute.
Okay.
So I would recommend that if you are being pressured to make that decision right off the bat, that is actually a sign of medical coercion. That might be a sign that you need to seek a provider who will not get emotional about your personal medical decisions. So, and the same is like that when you are talking with friends and family. Most of the time, you have a little bit of a period where you can talk with them. And if they have an appointment scheduled the next day, say, hey, you know what? I really would just love to have a little bit more conversations about this. I really care about you. I've heard some adverse reactions. Can we research this together? Can you reschedule? Maybe it's next week or a few days later, and then we can prioritize this research and research together. I've actually had that experience. I had a family member who was being pressured by another family member to accept a product, and I reached out to them directly, and we didn't have the best relationship, the closest relationship, but I cared about them and I didn't want them to be injured. They had some contraindications that I know would have caused an increased risk for an adverse reaction. And we just had a very frank and honest conversation, and they ended up not accepting it. It was funny because I recently just saw them and they said, yeah, I was able to have more informed conversations with my friends, my sphere of influence. And so going into it in that manner, I think will get you a lot farther than being more hostile or sarcastic. And it's easy to be bitter, especially once you do the research, but that's probably not the best way to go about it.
Yeah. And I also realized too, usually the closest to you have the hardest time hearing what you have to say. And then all of a sudden they'll hear it from someone else and they're like, wait a minute.
All the men
and
who
then,
watched Joe Rogan, and you've been saying it for
I
years.
remember that.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Yeah, I remember that. No, that's funny because I've had, like my family, they're very resistant to like whatever I have to say. Like sometimes I'll send something in the group message, they like it gets like they don't respond.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I know that it's really hard for them, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh look, you were right. Look at this article, and it's just so funny. I'm
well,
like,
at least
yeah,
they
I'm
circle back. That's nice.
yeah. I'm like, I'm just gonna keep planting seeds, and then when you
Yeah.
see something on mainstream or whatever that you trust, then it will make it click. Like whatever, at least you still realize like, oh, she is not like making stuff up or
Yeah. And that has been nice for this past few months, where so many things have been coming out, just the acknowledgement of the censorship and all these other things that have been slowly starting to come to the surface. And you start to realize, even for me, like, okay, I wasn't crazy. It's just for me to know, okay, this is validation that I wasn't off the deep end and that I was actually onto something. And it's not to get an ego about it, but just to kind of reaffirm that my intuition was sharp and that I need to be able to trust that in the future and not second guess myself so much.
Yeah, yeah. You're not crazy. That's funny.
Exactly.
We're not crazy. It seems like everything's almost coming true.
Yeah, that is true.
Everyone's starting to see it. So what role do you think healthcare providers should play in promoting informed consent?
Oh, I think informed consent should be the bedrock of every health provider. I think that is part of your job, is to communicate the known potential adverse reactions, the risks, the benefits, the alternatives, present all that information, because as a healthcare provider, you are an expert in that field and you have training, you have experience, you have clinical observations. So to be able to communicate that to your patient in a way that they will be able to understand it at their awareness level, which is hard. I'm sure that is so hard to do because every patient has a different level of awareness. But that's kind of your job as a healthcare provider, is to explain it to them in a way that they understand and for them to make their own decision and to not influence their decision based on what you want, but based on what they want and what might be best for them. Because even as a healthcare provider, with your years of experience and your hundreds of thousands of dollars of education, you do not have the expert level status that they have in their own body. And so it's important for you to take that information, and maybe something, especially for parents, they know their child best, and to respect that and respect that knowledge. Again, presenting the information the best that you can, serve them the best you can, but then the final decision rests with them.
Yeah, yeah. So what would you say to parents? You know how a lot of times, like I mentioned, they'll ask for the insert. Like, are doctors allowed to withhold like the real insert that comes with the medical product, or can you
This
like
gets really,
no?
yeah. This gets really tricky because most medical providers don't know what inserts are really. The only time that and I'm speaking from medical providers who have messaged me, they don't read manufacturer inserts unless a pharmaceutical representative has presented the package insert to them in a way to promote their product over a competitor's product. So typically that's clinical trial data, or if they themselves become personally responsible for a potential adverse reaction, or they become parents. That's really the critical times in a healthcare provider's experience where they start reading manufacturer inserts. So right off the bat, most of the time healthcare providers don't really know what the inserts are. They don't know how to get them. One thing that I just learned too is that, especially in hospitals, the pharmacy might get the insert. So if they have a bulk package, the example that was given was for vitamin K injection. If they get a bulk package, they might get one insert, but then there's a whole bunch of different little boxes in that bulk package, and they don't have the inserts. So some medical providers aren't even exposed to the inserts in the actual box because there is none in that little box that they get when they finally get the injection. The pharmacist might have it, but not the medical provider. So my advice is to not rely upon your medical provider for the insert. The FDA has every single manufacturer insert from a prescription, from a vaccine on the FDA website. And that's what my training course and my book and basically everything that I do is teaching you how to find and read them. My best advice is to research those before you go to a healthcare provider. So then you can print out the insert and then you can highlight the sections that you want to ask questions about based on your personal situation with your medical provider, and then go from there. It would be much better for you to already have that research under your belt before you go into the provider's office. And a little caveat too, I highly recommend not presenting any information. So even my website, justtheanswers.com, even though my website is 99.9% sourced from .gov resources, if a medical provider sees a .com resource, they have been trained to automatically disregard that resource. So my advice is to go straight to the manufacturer insert, straight to the .gov information. I cite everything so you can go do that yourself, and then bring that information in there and say, I read this off the government website, instead of like, I found an Instagram post. That's probably, you're not going to get very far with a healthcare provider if you do that. So that would be my advice. And then if you do get recommended a medical product based on your diagnosis or something like that, I would recommend asking your medical provider to write down the trade name and then confirm the spelling. Make sure you understand. I've had pediatricians write down things and I couldn't read anything they said. And so I had to follow up and said, can you write very clearly what this trade name is so I can go research it myself? And then even if it's a prescription, you typically have time before you go fill that prescription. It's normally not right off the bat that you get that prescription. So there is time for you to research it in your car, sitting in the waiting room at the pharmacy, something like that. And then even if you get the prescription, you have time afterward before you decide to administer it, depending on what it is. My kids had impetigo last year, and it was really, really, really bad. And my functional medicine doctor actually recommended an antibiotic because my daughter, her impetigo was on her face and it was getting towards her eye, and we were worried about blindness and all these other things. And so I actually filled the prescription, realizing because she diagnosed her with impetigo, I wasn't sure exactly what it was. And then on the way home, I filled the prescription, and then we came home, and then I was able to research more about impetigo, and I read the FDA website saying that it was self-limiting. And then I found all these other things, these other studies that said that the antibiotic could actually cause it to be antibiotic resistant, and it might clear it up, but then it might come back more aggressive. But I still had the antibiotic just in case if I needed it.
Yeah.
But I still had that time afterward. I call it the pause before the prescription. And I was able to take that time and really research it to make informed decisions. So it's not, you don't have to, it's not a game where if you miss this one opportunity, you can never have informed consent. You can never be able to make the decision. There's plenty of places where you can stop and pause and take the time to research.
I love that you mentioned that, because I was about to say that. I'm like, you can fill the prescription and then you can research before you decide if you actually want to use it. Because before way back when, I had thought that if a doctor gave me a prescription, if I didn't fill it, they'll know that I didn't fill it. They'll get mad at me.
They'll never call you. They'll never call you.
Right?
They're on to the next person.
You're like, I wonder if she filled this prescription. Let's go call.
I mean, if they do, that might be a good sign that your doctor's following up. But there are plenty of prescriptions that I've not filled, and they never call you.
Right? That's funny. But yeah, I used to have that thought way back when. I'm like, I have to fill this because they're gonna know, and then they're not gonna write me a prescription ever again.
Yeah, I don't know how it is now, but yeah, I've never had that. And again, that was the first pharmaceutical that I had gotten at a pharmacy in over 5 something years. And it was funny because I'm pretty natural minded in my community.
Mm-hmm.
I'm probably more of the crunchier side of things. And it was hilarious because there was another mom there who was also very natural minded, and she saw me at Walgreens filling out the prescription, and she said, "What are you doing here? You were the last person that I would have ever thought that you're here." I said, "Well, this is a testament that I'm saying that yes, I understand there are still things that you might potentially want to use. These are still tools that you could potentially use, but you can make, a decision later on if that's what you want to do or not." So it was really funny. Of all people, she was the one that saw me at the pharmacy.
I know. It's it's not, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. That's what's happening right now, in my opinion, to the crunchy or the toxic free community.
Mm-hmm.
It's always, there's kind of if it has to be this 100%, no, you should have flexibility. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Know when something is actually needed, instead of just immediately nope,
Exactly.
without realizing hey, it might be life-saving.
Mm-hmm.
We can't just, we can't, I don't know, be that kind of super no, it has to be this way, because I feel that gets dangerous.
It does. And Shauna from A Little Less Toxic, I don't know if you've heard her story or not. She's an incredible human being. I've heard her speak in person, and she's phenomenal. And her books are great too. But she talks about how, because of the damage that pharmaceuticals caused when she was younger, and the toxic load burden, and the way that she was living her life when she was in her 20s and when she was really young, caused her to get to a point that unfortunately, she needed more pharmaceuticals to provide life-saving care. And then after that happened, because I think she had staph and sepsis, I can't remember exactly what it was, but was like on death, knocking on death's door, and she needed that life-saving care. And then after that, she was able to realize and take a look at all of these other things that I had accepted. I didn't really need them, and it caused all these other issues. And so now she could address her lifestyle. She could address different things that she could do. And I love her, just being a little less toxic, because it's not necessarily all or nothing. It's just, what can you
Right.
do? And I actually watched your solo episode that you did for your first podcast, and I thought it was just beautiful. And how you said that doing the best that you can, and when you run out of something, then replace it with shampoo, all these different things. When I first started researching just toxins in general, I try to go full ham and replace everything, and I burned myself out. And I almost got to the point where I was like, there's no way that I can remove all the toxins, so why even try? And that's actually a very toxic mentality to be in. Yep. And so I had to remind myself, okay, just little by little things that I can do here and there, and within my budget, within my ability, and slowly progress as I've become a mother, as my kids have grown older too.
Right? Yeah, totally. It's really, that's kind of like a fine line, really. Like, a lot of people have that mindset where, like, if I can't do it all at once, I'm just not going to do it. It's like, well, that's an unhealthy way of thinking, and you're not helping your body lessen the toxic load by keeping on what you're doing. Like, be grateful that you're able to swap one thing at a time. Like, don't kill yourself over it, right? But yeah, that's like common. I've seen a lot of that too in the non-toxic groups, where also they're like, oh, it's so expensive to go toxic free or change my lifestyle. It's like, well, it's only expensive when you decide to swap out everything all at once.
Yeah, and I'm like you. I started this before all the big companies came out, and I couldn't afford what was on the market. And so I made a lot of my stuff, and it was actually way cheaper than most things on the market. And so for me, a lot of times when I read that and it says, well, it's really expensive to be non-toxic, and it's really expensive to be non-toxic and have the convenience. But you can be non-toxic. It might just be a little harder, and you might have to work, get a little elbow grease.
Yeah. It's definitely the convenience. It's the convenience aspect that adds on to the price. And if you're super busy, right? And then before too, I sometimes think to myself, sometimes I feel like it's more expensive to make it yourself, because you have to buy the jars, you have to buy to get the herbs cheaper. It's better to buy it in bulk, and you have to store it.
Yeah, that is true.
But yeah, there's definitely ways to go lower tox lifestyle on a budget. Like, there's so many ways to do it. It's not there's no rule guidebook, like you have to do this, you have to do that. But yeah,
I actually coordinated with a few friends of mine, and we bought bulk, but we just split it up. So we were able to get the cheaper, and then we thrifted glass bottles, which you could argue lead potential, all these other things, but it was at least better in our minds and helped us to have a little bit more control when our budget didn't necessarily allow us to change everything at once.
Yeah, totally. Plus, like I said, mentioned too, like when I just had one kid, I can make everything myself, no problem. And then once there's more kids, it's harder and harder to find that time.
Amen. I completely agree with that.
Yeah, that's why sometimes too, when I see people who are like, well, you can prep. You're like, wait, do my kids, what? My kids don't exist at night if I prepped at night? Like, when they kind of try to tell you when you should prep, for meal plan, meals and stuff like that. I was like, well, the kids are there all the time. When they go to sleep, I want to sleep.
Right. Exactly.
Because if I don't sleep, I'm going to be grumpy tomorrow.
Yes. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I have seasons. Where I'm really good and I prioritize it, and then seasons when I'm really focused on different things that I'm working on, like writing the book or doing the training course, and I'm not so good. Like the other day, I started seeing a whole bunch of information and people that were promoting certain medical products for the bird flu, and so I quickly did a post on it, and I ended up skipping dinner, and I posted, I said, I skipped dinner for this, and I got so many people that said, no, don't do that. We appreciate the information, but don't skip dinner. That's a good reminder. I needed that.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, it definitely, you're right. It's depends on the season. Don't beat yourself up and give yourself grace
Mm-hmm.
in this, yeah, the world of convenience. I always say it, like the modern world of convenience is making us sick, and we just have to know what we can control and what we can't.
Mm-hmm. That's so true. That is very true.
Okay, so what can patients do to advocate for themselves in a medical setting?
That's a really good question. So I think the first thing that a patient can do is that whenever they seek healthcare, with a medical provider, that they first understand the diagnosis. So when you bring your child in for a rash and the doctor doesn't really, might ask you some questions, might do a physical exam, and then they pull out a prescription pad, that's a warning sign.
Yeah.
As a parent, you should first say, what is the child being diagnosed with? Is it a viral rash? Is it a bacterial rash? Because if it's a viral rash and the doctor is prescribing an antibiotic, that doesn't make a lot of sense. So you want to make sure that you first understand and agree with the diagnosis. Over 20% of diagnoses in America are misdiagnoses. This is something that is, I can cite this and I have this on my website. So you need to make sure that you first agree with that. Many times too, when a doctor comes in, they have a standard of care. They have a kind of averaged out response to every single thing that comes across their office. So ear infections, rashes, different things. They might just take a quick glance and think, okay, well, this is this, not realizing that you might have anecdotal observations that could change that diagnosis. So to be able to communicate that to them. So for example, a high fever or irritability, or maybe the rash started on the trunk or it started behind the ear, or you need to be able to, as a parent, communicate clearly those observations right up front to the medical provider so that they can use it whenever they are utilizing their expert advice, clinical observations into making the decision or the diagnosis more accurate. So that's something that we need to be more active as parents and being engaged in that decision process. And then once you agree upon that diagnosis, then ask, okay, what is the treatment plan? Does it include lifestyle changes? Does it include nutritional changes? Does it include improving sleep? Are there things that may be contributing to it, like screen time or excessive exposure to other environmental toxins? There's so many things that can be addressed for a child outside of the pharmaceuticals. And so to ask those questions, I get so many messages from medical providers that complain of patients that come in only looking for a prescription, that they want to communicate all these other things like they can do with their patients, but they think that the patient is just coming in for a pharmaceutical. And so to be able to, as a parent, communicate to that medical provider, if that medical provider is trained and has knowledge in that, then that opens up the door for them to be able to have that conversation with you. And if they are willing, I guarantee you they're going to be happy to talk to you about it. But if the treatment plan is only pharmaceuticals, then you can ask the doctor, what is the how long is it going to be used for? Is it acute care? Is it chronic care? Is this Miralax that you're recommending for my child for constipation only for a day? Is it for a week? Is it daily for years? Because I've had pediatricians that have told me that, or I've had parents that have told me that their pediatrician recommended Miralax daily for years, which Miralax is used off label for children. It's not approved for anyone under 17 years old. So that's something for you to be aware of when you are talking with your doctor. You want to know, what is that recommended treatment plan? How long does it last? Because when you go to read the manufacturer insert, there are going to be adverse reactions that are listed for prolonged use. So then you can make that decision, okay, in order for my doctor to say that this condition or whatever symptom that I'm trying to deal with, if they're saying that I have to use this for longer than what the manufacturer has intended it for, that could increase the risk for potential adverse reaction in growth, in liver toxicity, and all these other things that as a parent we just really need to be aware of. And we probably don't really focus on because we don't want to see our children sick. We don't want to see them in pain. So we're just so focused on dealing with that one symptom that we're not looking at the body as a whole. We're not looking at all these holistic things that contribute to a sick child. And so having those more, I call it a tango, having that conversational tango with your healthcare provider, because it's a collaboration, it's a partnership, it's something that they provide their expertise, and then you provide your expert experience with your child, and then hopefully you can have the best solution out of that. And you might come across medical providers that don't like that they just want you to accept whatever they say as God's word. And you know what? That might be a sign for you to find a different healthcare provider. I actually consider that a gift now. I used to, whenever I had experience with that, I would get anxiety and I would just be so upset. But now I see it as a gift if I come across a medical provider that is not open to going outside their training, or is not open to have a more informed consent, patient focused conversation. Then that tells me that medical provider is not right for me. I need to find someone else. And it saves me time from having to deal with them in the future. And then I can go find someone that's more qualified and more fit to my personal needs.
Yeah, yeah, totally. It's not the end of the world.
Yeah, it might
Right.
feel like it. I've been there, I understand, but it's not, believe me.
Because I know that it's, a challenge to find that someone who really aligns with you, and or sometimes you might have to compromise a little bit, but yeah, I totally get that. I've had to fire my midwife, not for this pregnancy, but the last one before, because she all of a sudden wanted me to wear a mask to our appointments.
Mm,
And I'm like, no, I've never worn one. I'm not going to start wearing one,
mm,
you know. And then she's like, oh, we can just do virtual appointments. I'm like, well, that defeats the purpose of having a
right.
midwife and having that intimate relationship.
Right. And that, you know what? That's a gift. She just communicated to
Yeah,
you that, because I am a firm believer in the birth environment. There are hormones that are so sensitive to your environment, to sensitive to the people that are in your birth space. And so if you already have that animosity or negativity towards that person, your body is not going to relax. And the pain suppression hormones, the birth progression hormones are not going to do what they need to do, and you're going to be in a fight and flight situation. So it can actually make it more painful, longer birth. And so and I've said this so many times with so many women that are like, I'm 37 weeks. I don't like my OBGYN anymore because of this and this and this. And I said, you still have time. You can change. I've known plenty of people, close friends, who have changed and they've had beautiful births.
right.
So it's never too late to try to find. It might be really, 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 really hard. And you might have to ask outside of insurance networks, but it is doable.
Right. Yeah, totally. I totally believe that, like, hormones, that energy in the room can really affect how you birth, how long you're going to be in labor, and the outcome of your birth. It doesn't matter, right? If you're having a home birth, hospital birth, if sometimes to me, like, if there's people that like, oh, I want to watch you, I want to be there while you're giving birth, but then if you don't feel comfortable with them being there, let that be the time to set aside your people pleaser.
Yeah.
I'm saying this from experience with my first birth, but it's like the people pleasing in us sometimes gets us in trouble.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And we have to set those boundaries. I
Yeah.
110%. I had a 44-hour labor my first birth, and I had to really work on my mental landscape for my second and third births beforehand. And I would actually, the physical part was hard, but the mental part was even harder
Mhm.
for me. I had to really
Yeah.
work on that. I struggle with milk supply. And so I made sure this third pregnancy that I had the lowest stress possible. There's going to be stress naturally,
Yeah.
changing, going from two kids to three kids. Like there's naturally going to be some stress, but I worked really, really hard on that. And I had so much milk than I ever had in my first two pregnancies. And I believe solely it's because of the mental work that I did and the stress reduction that I focused
Right.
on while I was pregnant.
Stress really, stress is like the silent killer,
True.
truly.
So
Like,
true.
uh, and everyone has a different perception of stress too. Like people think that, oh, I'm not stressed because I don't have to drive in traffic. But it's like, well, that's not the only stress there
Right.
is. And, like there's so many different kinds of stresses that we need to manage. And so we just want to have that flexible nervous system to be
Mm-hmm.
able to adapt to the different stresses in life.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. I'm going to go on to ask you, in your experience, how can we start changing the way the pharmaceutical industry operates in relation to transparency and patient consent?
Oh wow, that's a great question too. These are wonderful questions. I think twofold. We're going to see a top-down change, hopefully with the new administration, with RFK Jr. and the different people that he's put within HHS, NIH, CDC, FDA. I think we will see a change from that aspect, and then also keeping our political representatives accountable, reaching out to legislators, saying that it's important for us that potential financial conflict of interest within the pharmaceutical realm, within the health provider realm, are looked over. I actually cover the anti-kickback laws in my book, and I talk about how even though the incentive programs for pediatricians, for primary care physicians look very similar to kickbacks and the way that kickbacks are defined, they technically aren't considered them because they're public. And so I think that more pressure on those incentive programs and maybe de-incentivizing some of those will enact change. And I believe Callie Means is really gung-ho about that and trying to focus on that from the top down level. And then from the bottom up level, for us to be more active in our provider appointments and to realize that healthcare is a service and it's something that we are just being informed consumers to ask questions and to make more well-considered medical decisions. I know it can be so hard. I don't know what it is, something about the stress of trying to schedule an appointment, dealing with reception, dealing with the scheduling, then going to the appointment and then sitting in the waiting room and then going to another waiting room and then being disrobed. It's a very kind of humiliating type of experience sometimes, but we still are gaining a service and potentially gaining a good if you're given a vaccine or an injection or a pill or anything like that, and you are still a consumer and you still have rights. So to understand that, no matter what you're going through, that you have that ability to accept, delay, and decline any medical product. And then if you do feel comfortable talking with a provider about your concerns, maybe sharing the manufacturer inserts with them, that's fine. But just know too that no is a full sentence. And if you don't want to do that, you don't have to do that. So that's only if you're willing and you feel like you have the relationship to do that, but don't feel like it's on your shoulders to do that. Hopefully the more of us who have been seasoned and a little bit more veteran, we can take that on. And then just sharing within your sphere of influence, not being so scared about polarizing views, taking the information and equipping yourself with credible information. I would hope that we could say that .gov information is credible. We could argue that sometimes it's not. But if a manufacturer is saying that SIDS can potentially be caused by a DTaP vaccine, that is something that is credible. That is something that the manufacturer and the government and the FDA know. And that's something that you can have more informed, productive conversations within your sphere of influence. So I think it's a lot of things. I think that a lot of things happening in parallel with each other. Hopefully we will shift towards a society that values informed consent more.
I'm just going to make a quick remark. When you said, like, you know, we wear the gown while waiting for the doctor, I saw like a little, I don't know where I saw it, but basically they're saying, yeah, the reason why they make you wear that gown and your butt sticking out so that you feel, you know, like kind of like smaller than the doctor who's there with the white coat.
I believe it. I mean, I don't think anybody sitting there naked feels authoritative or empowered.
Take off your clothes. You'll believe what I say.
Exactly. That is a very vulnerable situation to be in. So maybe there is some psychology behind it. So maybe if you start to have that conversation, put on your pants real quick. You can feel a little bit more emboldened to have that conversation.
No, but don't you love it though when they're like, okay, I'm gonna step aside real quick so you can take off your clothes and put on the gown, and it's like, okay, but when you come back in and you're gonna look under the gown, it's still gonna be naked. What's the point? Just watch me take off my clothes.
Exactly. Or have you seen those videos where you try to hide the underwear, you try to hide and it's like they're going to see you. I don't know what it is about seeing your intimates.
See something more private than your underwear.
Exactly. I always thought that was so funny. I was like, oh, I didn't realize. Yeah, we do that.
Right? It's like hide it in the pocket of your pants.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. We're almost Done. I just want to touch on real quick that provider directory that you're launching. What are you most excited about in connecting parents and patients with informed consent friendly providers?
Oh, I'm so excited for this. This is one of the things that I have been wanting to do for a while now. First of all, bravo to everybody that has already done a provider directory underground. I know Dr. Green Mom has one. I know there are plenty Crunchy Mama groups out there that have collected people in their groups and they send it out for their state or their local areas. That is an amazing service that you've done. And I don't want to undervalue that because I think that is incredibly helpful. For the provider directory that I'm doing, I am going full ham on this, and I basically want it to be as easy as Angie List or as easy as Zillow. I have a software developer that is building a custom site for this. I was actually just looking it over earlier today, and it looks so good. It isn't static, it's interactive. As a person, as a patient, you can go in, or as a user, you can go in and add a provider, or if you're a provider, you can add yourself. You can put all the information on there. There's an active review system. So if you have a provider that maybe doesn't honor informed consent, you can write a review and hold them accountable, and everybody else can see that. And there's an interactive map that works. And it's even as simple as something for some of the providers, if they provide their phone number, when you click on it, it'll open up to your phone app, or if it has an address, it'll open up to Google Maps or Apple Maps. And it's just those simple things. As a parent, it just makes it so much more streamlined, and I just love. So I'm really excited for people to go in there and to be able to use it, to be able to share all the providers that they have been exposed to, for providers to get in there and realize that there is a market out there for them. Most of the providers that start to businesses outside of the insurance world, they realize that they are really good at medicine, but they're not really good at marketing, and they're not really good at getting their services out there. So I'm hoping that this will help providers, and then it'll help patients connect with each other and to grow. And obviously, the more people that use it, the better that it'll be. And I'm really excited. Hopefully, beta will start in January, and then we'll open up to public February, maybe March timeframe. So I am excited for all of that, and just to make it a little bit more concrete that informed consent is something that providers want, and it's something that patients want.
I love that. I can feel your excitement through the screen. So I'm very excited for that too. So that's going to create to me, like a very beautiful dynamic for, like the medical world, right? Like,
Yes, yes.
yeah, it will
And in
be,
virtual too, we'll have virtual options, which I think is great too, that so many people don't know that you can do a lot of this stuff virtually. And I know you do labs and do different things. And so that's going to be wonderful that someone that might be in California that might not have an in-person, someone that they can go to physically, but there are other things that you can do virtually. So I'm
Mhm.
excited to be able to connect people with that.
Yeah, almost everything's virtual now, so, right?
Yes.
I know that there's something still, like, people still want to go to see the person face to face. It's totally a different experience. I get it, but sometimes you just have to be flexible too.
Yeah, and you can piecemeal it. You can, I mean, like when you realize that it's a service, there's different things that you can do here and there, and you can figure out what works best for you. So having that autonomy and that more active role in your health, I think, is exciting.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm excited for the future. I'm cautious just because we've gone through so much in the last few years, but I am optimistic overall.
yeah, yeah. I think I think there's a change coming, and it looks it looks bright.
Yes, as long as we stick the course and we link arms
Right?
together, and we don't fight with each other, and we just focus on the common goal. I think it's definitely very bright.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's all the time we have. Thank you so much, Alexandra. Remind the listeners where they can find you. Of course, everything's going to be in the show notes, and where they can find you, and some other, if you have freebies and whatnot that you want to share.
Yep, everything's at justtheanswers.com. My free training course is always going to be free, no email required to access. It's in English and Spanish audio options for the training course. I also have my book, Well Considered, a handbook for making informed medical decisions. You can find that at justtheanswers.com. And then I'm on Instagram and X as Just the Answers.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, Alexandra. And to all the listeners who are still here, see you next time and stay rebellious. Thank you. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please click the subscribe button. Share it with others, post about it in social media, or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest from me or suggest topics, you can follow me on Instagram at Fatima Pagtakan or at The Wellness Rebel Show. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.